When I was a kid, I attended a church that my parents helped started called Harvest Community Church. And I remember very distinctly there was a lesson about John 11:35, which is the shortest verse in the Bible. And I still remember it to this day. And we had a discussion about what it meant. So let's see what grown-up Aaron, how he does with that question. So Jesus and his disciples, they're sitting in a town and they get word that Lazarus, who is one of a beloved friend of Jesus, who has two sisters, Mary and Martha, is ill. And Jesus does something that's kind of interesting. When he finds out that his friend is sick and they want him to come visit and really heal him, right? Because that's what Jesus is doing at this point. He delays, he waits, and he doesn't go right away. And then Lazarus dies. So when Lazarus passes away, his sisters are really upset, and Jesus makes his way to where they are. And immediately the sister Martha runs out to greet Jesus, and she's grieving and she's sad because her brother has passed away. And she says to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died," right? But she says, "I still know that you can do all things," right? So she still has faith in Jesus, even though she's grieving, she's upset. And then as they go later on, Mary, her sister, rises and goes to where Jesus is as well, right? Although she didn't do it right away because she was grieving, upset about her brother's death. And she says the same thing to him. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have passed away." And in both of the sisters saying the same phrase, it kind of says to me something that siblings do quite often, right? They talk with each other when they're upset, when they're venting. And I imagine that Mary and Martha, in their grief, had said those words, if Jesus would just get here, right? And as Lazarus is passing away, when Jesus gets here, it'll be fine. It'll be okay. And then Jesus' timing is not theirs. God's is not our own timing, right? So he passes away before Jesus comes. And that is real disheartening to both of the sisters who loved Jesus and who loved their brother. And then Jesus gets there and he sees Lazarus, and that's where he weeps. Jesus wept. That's the verse that we went over as kids, right? And here's why I think that is. I think that the full impact finally hit Jesus. That here he is performing miracles. He's speaking with the people. He's praying with the people. He's among them, God among us, right? He's walking among us. And yet, when he's away from them for just a short time, they lose faith. They then all of a sudden start to doubt what God can do, God's timing. And in that moment, as he looks at Lazarus, Jesus knows what needs to be done. He knows what can be done. He knows that these children of God need a permanent solution. They need permanent grace. They need repentance. They need a life that is free from all of the flesh that holds them down. Exactly what's going on with Lazarus right now. His sisters are just as dead in this moment as he is because their faith has died. And so Jesus weeps because in those tears washes down the living water that is our salvation, that is our grace. If you ask me how I stand here today, living this light, showing this truth, it's because of those tears. It's because in a moment of weakness, of sadness, he found the strength to cry, to be vulnerable. And from that, God's timing took effect and the power of God stepped in and Lazarus rose. And his sister's faith was restored. Because at the end of the day, when our faith dies, there's only one person who can bring the resurrection of that, and that's Jesus Christ. And he brings with us living water, grace, and forgiveness. And so, in the shortest verse in the Bible, we see Jesus' promise, which is tied so intricately into God's promise. Jesus wept. When the living waters fell, Jesus wept. Chatting at Cheesman. Happy Sunday.